Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
All of today's guests, including for the second time this week, Ian Furness, brought to you by the Vancouver Giants. Giants are on a lengthy prairie road trip. Ian remembers those and returns to the LEC for a 2 p.m. matinee game Sunday, January 21st. Visit vancouvergiants.com/tickets for ticket details. Just before we get to Ian, Delaney's OK Tire and Langley inbox, Jordan in North Van. If it were up to Donnie, not only would they not trade for Gensel, but they would trade away Hughes and Pedersen and start the rebuild. Very good, Jordan. I've said a million times that it looks like I'm wrong, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
Okay? That's fine. As somebody who's followed this team for a long, long time, it looks like the rebuild isn't going to happen, and that's okay.
Done.
Pete Carroll out as head coach of the Seattle Seahawks after 14, I would say, stunningly successful seasons.
Very good seasons.
Down there in the Emerald City. And so for the second time this week, we bring in, on an emergency basis, I would say, this is a big story up here from KGR Sports Radio and Fox 13 Sports, Ian Furness. Ian, thanks for doing this, sir. How are you? I imagine the answer would be busy.
Very, very busy. Hi, gentlemen. How are you? Great to be on here. Sponsored by Ron Toigo's Vancouver Giants, who are on the midst of that prairie trip. Nothing screams a good time like January in Saskatchewan and Manitoba.
on a bus. Okay. Yeah. Again, you're busy. Thanks so much for joining us again this week. Just your reaction to the news that Pete Carroll is out as head coach of the Seattle Seahawks.
Well, I mean, we're here 23 hours later. I'm still stunned, guys. I really am. I'm surprised. And remember, he wanted to come back. So this was not his decision not to come back. And so I think that's the part that really kind of shocks me the most. If he would have given us an indication that maybe he was done, wanted to walk away, that's one thing. But Pete Carroll wanted to come back. And I did not think that Jody Allen and Bert Kold, who kind of run the Paul Allen Trust, the de facto owners right now, would have the appetite to get rid of the most successful coach, not just in Seahawks history, but in Seattle sports history. But here we are on this day, this Thursday, and a coaching search is underway, and away we go.
Okay, so you do, for people who don't know, I mean, who up here doesn't listen to Ian Furness on KGR Sports Radio? But you do a talk show down in Seattle, and in all seriousness, Ian, a lot of people do listen. Is this a popular decision? And if not, who are people blaming?
Well, I say it's mixed, Donnie, to be honest with you. And it's not great talk show fodder because there's no one side or the other. It's there's a lot of the fan base that's like, yeah, about time. We need a new coach. We need an offensive minded guy. And then there's a lot of others that are saying, hey man, be careful what you wish for. And, moving on from a guy that had great success, but maybe the message was lost along the way. I think the fan base in a sense has become a little complacent. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We saw this when the Steelers came to town, the final regular season home game. I've never seen that many visiting fans in Lumen Field in my life. Usually it's the other way around. Seahawk fans invade other cities. The stadium's always full, but I think that might have been a red flag. And I think the business side of it does come into play a little bit. And, when you're talking about season ticket renewals and corporate sponsorship renewals, the newfound competition with the Kraken and Climate Pledge Arena and corporate sales and all the things that go to that, maybe an NBA team down the road, there's probably a few red flags in addition to football not being as successful as it had been under Pete Carroll that came into play. But again, I just thought when Pete Carroll was done coaching the Seahawks, it would be Pete Carroll's decision. And so that part of it to me is still very surprising.
Ian, so Sunday in Arizona, Carroll says, I want to return. On his radio show Monday, I want to return. I thought it was fascinating in the news conference when he said he fought hard to remain as head coach with the owner. Boy, he didn't want to go. No. Ian, would you call it a firing?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I because of everything you just said, Rick. When you say after the game, I expect to be back and I want to be back, and those were the things he said Sunday to us and down in Arizona. He goes on his state-run radio show and says the same thing, and then 2 days later he's out.
Yeah.
So yeah, listen, they kept him on as an advisor. That basically, Mike Holmgren was in studio with us yesterday, and as Mike said, he goes, "That's just so they can pay him, just so they pay him still." And he's not going to really do much. He's just getting paid. He has nothing to do with the coaching search that will take place. That's all John Schneider. So yeah, I think it's safe to say, for lack of a better term, as harsh as it may sound, 14 years. 10 playoff appearances, a Super Bowl win, all the equity he built up. Despite all of that, yeah, I think it's safe to say Pete Carroll got fired.
72 years old. We know the passion. We've seen it on the sidelines. We love his enthusiasm. Can this guy sit at home? I mean, do you see him? Do you see him sitting at home or getting back in the game? Well, someone would have to pay him what he's making right now.
Right. And he's one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid coaches in the NFL. So I'm not sure who would do that. He also, the thing that made this successful in Seattle is he had the relationship with John Schneider. And it was the synergy between those two was second to none in the NFL. And that's why you had such a long tenure, the 14 years. It just doesn't happen in a league that is built for parity, a league that doesn't want teams to succeed year in and year out. They want to have teams rebuild, to be honest with you. Seattle did none of those, but a lot of it was because you had a head coach and a president, / president, the guy in charge of all football, in Pete Carroll, and his lieutenant in John Schneider, who were in perfect lockstep. They didn't always agree. They'll tell you that. They didn't always agree. But they got the job done, and they had a tremendous working relationship. We used to joke about it down here. They'd sit there, especially draft day, one of our favorite, 3 days of the year, and they finish each other's sentences. So, yeah, the yin to the yang that is Schneider to Carroll, Pete has that energy. He has all those things going. I think he would be really hard-pressed to find that perfect situation somewhere else where he has that type of – and the other thing, that type of autonomy. He's not going to go to New England where Robert Kraft oversees everything. He's not going to go to Dallas if they fire Mike McCarthy, if they get bounced in the first round. Mark Davis is a nut job in Vegas. You're not going to go work for him. Plus, they're cheap. The Chargers in L.A. is the one that I could maybe see.
Yes.
Just because of his ties to Los Angeles. But, that's Spanos family. I mean, they're like, if Mark Davis is the worst owner in the NFL, they're not too far behind. So the only thing there is you have a built-in quarterback. You got Justin Herbert, which makes that appealing job. But I never say never. I also never thought Pete Carroll would get fired, so maybe he does end up somewhere else. But I would be surprised. He's got grandkids running around. Maybe he takes some time and does that. I'm not so sure he wouldn't be great on television, to be honest with you, and stay involved somehow that way. His enthusiasm for the game, maybe put him, with all the new college restructuring and realignment, maybe he could do something there. Heck, if Chris Peterson and Urban Meyer can do TV, they got personalities of the back of my phone case. So if those guys can do it, put Pete on, man. He'd be fun.
Yeah.
Maybe he could take over your twice weekly hits on Donnie and Dolly. Just a thought.
Let me just check the contract here. I thought
bonus.
I knew this was coming up.
Could have sworn it expired. I mean, I got the kind of like sayonara from our guy Henderson. He's like, yeah, well, we'll talk to you, next year or whatever. We got important stuff here. We got Ferraro or Farhan or whoever on these things. You got Tucker. You got all these other big time people. So I kind of figured I was not. Listen. I've been put on waivers before, man. I know what it feels like. I know you get called into the coach's office, and that's what happened on Tuesday with you guys. I get it. I understand. I'm no hard feelings, but here you are, a couple injuries later. You got to sign me off the practice squad, and I'm here for you, hanging out, having a good time. So
we've got outstanding looking bucket hats. We'll send a couple your way.
I love bucket hats. Send my way.
Done deal.
I'm a bucket hat guy. No, I got a lot of call. I got some stuff back from your people the other day. It's like I think I have more Twitter followers from your show than I do from my own damn show down here, which is somewhat troubling, to be honest with you. That's a little bit of a red flag.
Hey, who's going to take Pete Carroll's place as head coach?
Well, I think, honestly, in all seriousness, Dan Quinn's the guy. He's the leader in the clubhouse. He has to be, right? Like he's when I first heard the news yesterday and it came out, I thought for sure that it was to kind of a preventive strike because Dan Quinn's going to probably be a head coach next year somewhere in the National Football League. for people who don't know, he was the defensive coordinator for Seattle when they won the Super Bowl, and then when they went back to the Super Bowl, and then he's went on to be head coach for a while with Atlanta. Took the Falcons to a Super Bowl. Ironically, on the day that Bill Belichick steps down or gets fired or whatever happened to him, he lost in the Super Bowl to Belichick. Kind of they blew a big fourth quarter lead, if you remember. He got fired a couple years later, a year later, but Dan Quinn's one of those guys like Belichick, like Carroll, maybe like Jim Harbaugh, that was going to get a second chance in the NFL and probably will have more success the second time around. And so whenever Dallas' season is over, it could be this weekend, it could be in a couple of weeks, could be Super Bowl. I think he's at the top of the list for sure. The other thing is, keep in mind, Donnie and Rick, if Dallas gets bounced in the first round of the playoffs, pretty decent chance that McCarthy gets let go in Dallas, and then maybe Dan Quinn becomes a leading candidate there, depending on how they lose that game. McCarthy would be available. He's an offensive-minded coach, which they go down that road. Of course, Harbaugh's name's being tossed out, and I'm trying to think the Vancouver equivalent of Jim Harbaugh for the Canucks. Boy, who would that be? I don't even know, but it would be, just like find a rival and bring him in. They just beat Washington in the championship game, so I'm not sure if that, and the 49ers, history and legacy with them as well, but Harbaugh is going to probably have his pick of jobs too. So it's going to be exciting. Honestly, I mean, we haven't had this in 14 years, and, chasing that story around and all the rumors that'll go with it, it'll be kind of fun.
Mike Keenan wouldn't be a bad answer, and that happened here.
Yeah, right. And so you never know how it's going to work out either. So I was trying to think who was coaching Calgary when Torts went after him in the hallway. Bob
Hartley.
Bob Hartley. Yeah.
That was more Torts rival than it was, because it went back to the minor league days. Yeah. More Torts rival than the Canucks rival.
I love Torts, so I thought that was great, to be honest with you. Yeah. Let's go. That's old-time hockey, huh? Rick Ball on the call. Fantastic stuff. Yeah.
We're going to bring up Torts. He was at it again yesterday in another way.
I saw that.
We're going to bring him up later on in the show.
He went after the podcast guy. That was great. That's awesome.
Hey, just so you know, thanks.
Pigeon, I love it.
Thanks so much for it is gold. Thanks so much for doing this. And you brought this up earlier. We've run out of bucket hats, but we do have Donnie and Dolly phone cases. So we'll send a couple of those your way, and that'll make up for this extra hit.
No expense. No expense for you. No expense.
Hey, you know what? That's I'm glad you're thinking of me, Rick. I appreciate that. You know what? Anytime, all joking aside, anytime, guys. I'm sure we'll talk again real soon. Who knows what's next? Maybe the Mariners will win a game or something. We can talk about that. So
yeah. Well, we'll talk to you tomorrow. All right.
See you, boys.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate it.
All right.